Welcome to Module 1 of ED 621A Curriculum Design. In this module, we're setting the stage for your lesson. We're unpacking standards, writing transfer goals, and lesson objectives. So your goal for this particular module and for the entire course really is to understand the relationship of understanding by design, transfer goals, and learning objectives to the state or course standards and performance indicators. And if you'll remember, we have the standards, the Alaska standards, and other standards here for you to refer to for that resource. We're going to navigate the course web page. You are going to locate and identify a content area standard that you want to use for your lesson. You're going to design transfer goals and learning objectives for that standard, and you're going to use the understanding of by design model for all of your work. So your tasks for Module 1 is attend an online 621 ABC orientation meeting, which I think you've done, and that's why you're here. Hopefully you've read the syllabus and the course schedule. I'm going to review the resources for this module with you in a minute. The text you're reading for this particular module is Understanding by Design, the Introduction, Chapter 1 and Chapter 3. That's the Wiggins and McTighe book. Complete the Checking for Understanding quiz in this module. Before or after you've completed the work doesn't matter. Probably helps if you do it before. Same with the reading response. And if you recall, I mentioned that having the reading responses now is a way for not only for you to be accountable for the readings that we have, but those readings inform your work directly on the lesson plan and the unit design that we're going to be doing later. And hopefully this will require me to provide less feedback to you because you'll already know what you need to be doing, or at least you'll have a hook into that if when you do the readings. So because the readings really guide this whole class. The Module 1 assignment is to choose your standard, to write, this is one or two, but probably one transfer goal for that standard. There could be two. We're making a limited time short-term lesson. We're not going long. It's not a unit lesson. It can be anywhere from a day to a week. Design specific, measurable student and family friendly learning objectives focused on the transfer goals using active higher level thinking verbs. And you've seen the Bloom material in the resources section. And then submit your assignment to the Dropbox by the due date, and you can make revisions after the due date without penalty if you've made an initial submission. And just plan on resubmitting. That's really what this is all about. It's about learning and moving forward. So let's look at the material for Module 1. There will be this screencast here for you to watch. There'll be a screencast for measurable objectives as well. So we have two. We have the overview screencast and then the Unpacking Standards, and they're together. And then the screencast for creating measurable objectives here by itself. You want to watch both of those. Here's a form measurable verbs by Bloom, and you can see that you have all these different kind of verbs you can use in your lesson. You're probably going to want to work in this area up here, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, although now the new version of Bloom's has different terminology. Then you have Bloom's taxonomy for digital tasks. So those of you that are using technology for your, units and for your lessons, here we have the taxonomy. Again, this is the new version of the taxonomy. And up here, analyzing, evaluating, and creating, you have all sorts of verbs that have to do with technology that we've learned in the last 20 years. So please feel free to use this resource. It's a great resource. And then the quick flip questions. You should probably have a set of them, and if you don't, they're in the resources for the course up here, and required text and supplemental text. I think we have a copy of it in there. Some people really enjoy the Bloom's taxonomy tree. It's just very visual. Same routine, just a different visual. We have analyzing, evaluating, and creating here with a lot of the verbs that you can use. You can print this out. You can paste it on your wall or paste it in your notebook, but it's a real handy tool for you. Then I have the slideshows the PowerPoints, just the slideshows for you that go with the screencasts above. This is the template you'll be using for all 4 modules for this course section for A, 621A. And so we have your detail up here. Note that you want to fill these things in. You also want materials for your lesson. This isn't, you don't need that until your final product. So if you're kind of working it out still, you put this on when you're finalizing your lesson, including the type of technology used, standard, transfer goals, enduring understandings, essential questions, and for the lesson, 1 or 2 are sufficient of either of these. We're still in stage 1 looking at acquisition, the objectives. What are the students acquiring? And the learning targets, what should students know? What should students be able to do? You'll have 1 or 2 for each of these. And related to each of those, you'll have an assessments. They may be formative, summative, or performance. You're going to identify what kind of assessments they are, but they should match directly whatever this objective is. That's why the arrow is there. Hope that's clear. Let me know if you don't understand it. And then opportunities to learn, or learning opportunities, or instructional activities. I will be including. I will probably have shown this to you in the overview of a glossary that we have, and there's a lot of synonyms, and so we don't want you to be confused with the synonyms. So this is where you write down what you're going to do for the students, what the teacher is doing to get the students active. So you're going to start, what's your hook for your lesson? What are 3 to 5 instructional activities that are leading to the demonstration of the knowledge and skills required for this lesson? So again, you're going to relate it directly to this, the processes and products of what the students are doing. And then differentiation, universal design for learning, multimodal instruction, whatever language you're familiar with, you're going to identify the ways you're providing opportunities in your lesson to meet the needs of your diverse learners. So usually this column would be embedded here, and for the unit that would be probably expected. But here we're having you parse it out. We're having you label it out so that you are paying attention to how you're looking at your diverse learners in your classroom and what kinds of things you're doing on their behalf so they can learn. Knowing again that this is a small short-term lesson. It is not a big long unit. And then finally you want to bring everything together at the end of the lesson. What are you going to do to tie up all the pieces and maybe reconnect with the hook at the beginning so that students know that they've gone through the material and learned what, and so that you know too what they've learned, the acceptable evidence of learning, but also just bringing things to closure. So that's your lesson plan template, and this is what you'll be using for each assignment. You're checking for understanding. You have you can read the test yourself. There's some quiz questions and some short answer questions. And then here's your drop box for your first set of assignments, which is this content standard, transfer goals, and both columns of learning objectives. So with that, we're going to go to the PowerPoint that looks at setting the stage and unpacking the standards. So here we are at Unpacking Standards, Creating Transfer Goals, and Designing Measurable Objectives for your single content area lesson plan, your short-term lesson. And all of these terms are in the glossary, but they're also new for you. And so this is a learning experience for you in terms of just understanding the vernacular of understanding by design. So right now, this is what we're doing for Module 1. Why is backwards design important? And the Cheshire Cat said it most elegantly, because if you don't know where you're going, how do you know when you get there? So backwards design starts at the end. It starts at where you want to go and then puts the ladder going down to, or going up to get there. How are we going to make our way there, and how are we going to know when we get there? So in the 3 stages, which stage 1 is what we're working on right now, the desired goal, which comes from the standards, you're going to start planning with the end goal in mind, develop essential questions and understandings that students will address during the unit, and students will be assessed on these understandings. Stage 2 is assessment evidence, and stage 3 is designing the learning plan. And Assessment evidence, evidence of understanding is how students know they've achieved the goal and how you know they've achieved the goal and the objectives, and should be differentiated to fit student needs. Learning plan that you set up is how are they going to get to the goal? What are you going to do to help them reach the goal? And how long will it take? And that's on page 36 of your book. Unpacking Standards, Stage 1, Essential Question. What is worth teaching and assessing? And that's like the big, big question. So that's what you're going to determine as you're designing your lesson. And you're going to have 4 categories of standards: long-term transfer goals, overarching understandings, 3 overarching essential questions, and a set of recurring cornerstone tasks. Again, these will be embedded in our conversation. The first step is translating core standards into engaging and outcome-focused curriculum. So it involves turning the state standard into something that can be used in the classroom, essentially. And then when you do that, you're providing clarity about what the results are that you expect and how they fit together. So you're going to design some transfer goals. You're going to identify the effective uses of the content, understanding, knowledge, and skill that you're looking for in the long run. So even though we're doing the beginning now with just looking at the standards and the goals, you're still thinking in mind about your objectives. What do we want students to be able to know, and what do we want them to be able to do when they confront new challenges, both in and outside of school? And that's one of the key pieces of understanding by design is authenticity. It's not just an academic task where they're doing a research project for you or doing a writing assessment, or even in a language arts class where they're reading a textbook or a novel. The novel and the book report is not the authentic task. It's like, what does that novel bring to that student's experience and how does it stretch them? So, for example, we have a math standard: solve problems involving measurement and conversion of measurements from larger unit to smaller unit and involving time. So the standard, it's very abstract, and I'm not even sure I could explain it if I were asked to explain it. But it suggests a goal, such as students will be able to use the math they know to solve messy, never seen before problems using effective mathematical reasoning. Again, that's still pretty long, but that's the transfer goal. It's like if they had to balance their checkbook, what do they have to do when they get a negative balance? How are they going to juggle the funds so that the balance comes out positive? Those messy situations, those real life situations. Some standards include thinking or doing that is very difficult or impossible to measure or explain. And these are the words we avoid in goals and objectives. But the standards have these words. They have know, understand, appreciate, think about, learned. That's great. That's like the big overarching piece, but that's not where you're going. You're getting down to the nitty-gritty. You will always be asked to rewrite if you use the word know and understand in your goals. Use the thinking verbs that you saw in Bloom's. Any of those verbs, probably most of those verbs, will work very effectively. Know and understand are vague, and there are many ways to know and understand. What do you mean? What does it look like? When you have the answer to that question, that's the verb you use, not know and understand. Same with appreciate. How do we know when someone is appreciating something? How? What does it look like? What I appreciate and what you appreciate looks really different. So that's very subjective, and that's what we want to avoid. Recognize, the same. What do you mean when you use the word recognize? So again, I'll refer you to your Bloom's Taxonomy Quick Flip book, or the Bloom's Tree, which is delightful and colorful and also just as helpful. So let's unpack a standard. When we unpack a standard, we make sure all the verbs are defined and can be measured. It can be easily understood by students, and the learning is relevant. Again, think authenticity, or at least meaningful in the context of a bigger picture than just the classroom. Think of their lives. What is it that's relevant in their lives? If moose hunting is relevant in their lives, use moose hunting as your analogy, as your connector. The learning is something that the child should be able to know and or do and is important beyond the student's immediate interests or culture. So that can be a big global idea as well. What is worth teaching and assessing? Again, this is the decision you are making. So here's a citizenship content standard and the performance indicators. And you will notice in the core Common Core standards and the Alaska content standards that a lot of these elements are performance indicators. Performance indicators are not transfer goals. They are performance indicators. They indicate the kind of performance that's expected based on the standard. You can determine if it's a transfer goal. So a student should have the knowledge and skills necessary to participate effectively as an informed and responsible citizen. So we have knowledge and skills. They're your nouns. The nouns, they have to have knowledge and skills. What do they have to know? They have to know the important characteristics of citizenship. Well, now we're getting somewhere where it might be measurable, because you can measure characteristics and you can observe people demonstrating those characteristics. And you can recognize it is important for citizens to fulfill their public responsibilities. So these are two performance indicators. But recognize, again, is very vague. So how are you going to measure students' recognition of the importance of how citizens fulfill their public responsibilities? It can be measured, but you're going to have to change the language. And that's what you're doing when you're unpacking the standard, is you're changing the language. There's a standard, knowledge and skills, the performance indicators, know and recognize. Where are we going to go with that? Here is a citizenship content standard along with some performance indicators. Here we go again. Be able to, now all the red words are verbs that you would probably find or could find on your Bloom's taxonomy. Be able to exercise political participation by discussing public issues, building consensus, becoming involved, and voting. All these things are measurable, but they're still performance indicators. They are not yet transfer goals. To be able to establish, explain, and apply criteria useful in evaluating rules and laws. To establish, explain, and apply criteria useful in selecting political leaders. Recognize, well, that word recognize, the value of community service, and be able to implement ways of solving problems and resolving conflict. So these are still very broad, but you're getting narrower, and you're thinking of your students at their grade level and what part of this standard are you going to be teaching them. You're probably not going to be teaching all of these performance indicators. You're going to select the performance indicator and work your transfer goal off that performance indicator. So the thinking and doing verbs are highlighted in red, and these verbs will create our objectives and the goal. For now, we want to rewrite the established standard into transfer goals that are student-friendly and use clear action verbs and can be used to write measurable objectives. So what you have to do is think, can it be measured? Can it be observed? Can I actually somehow quantify or qualify it in a specific way? So specificity, you're thinking specificity. So the established standard is a student should have the knowledge and skills necessary to participate effectively as an informed and responsible citizen. Great big broad standard. Transfer goals, more specific than the performance indicators. These are examples. This isn't comprehensive. A student can explain the important characteristics of citizenship. Can you measure that? Yes. Can you make an objective with it? Yes. Will students know when they can do that? Yes. So you're looking at how you're quantifying these performance indicators. They can explain the value of community service. They can apply criteria to evaluate rules and laws. They can discuss issues in order to build consensus. All of these things are observable in some fashion. A student can apply strategies to solve problems and resolve conflict, which is the mediator program or the mediation program. A student can research a candidate on relevant criteria and inform their voting choices during an election. So all of these are actually real-world applications of citizenship standards, of the citizenship standards. But these are goals. They're even more specific than the performance indicators. Please keep it simple. MKISS, keep it simple, silly. Notice that the transfer goals are still broad, but are much more easily transformed into measurable objectives due to the use of active verbs. Also notice they're narrowed down to a specific area of endeavor, that the multiple tasks seen in the performance indicators are separated out so the goal is not as complex. You're just choosing. You're not going to use all of them. You're going to choose the one that really suits the lesson you're designing. This will eventually help you effectively scaffold the learning experiences. So when we unpack a standard, we turn established standards into transfer goals. They're easily understood by students, by families, they're measurable, and they're easily aligned to the objectives. I went back the other way. There we go. So you can't see the very top. It says established goals outside of the frame. Understanding essential questions. This is the UBD template, lesson plan template. So you've got your established goals, which is up here, which you can't see. The enduring understandings and essential questions students will know and able to do, and assessment evidence. Now you'll notice on our lesson plan, we've moved the objectives and the assessment evidence next to each other so that they are clearly aligned, so you can see the clear desire to align those. So for this module, after you've selected your content standard and creating your transfer goals, view the next PowerPoint, the next screencast, Designing Measurable Objectives, a very important one, and design the learning objectives for your goals. Please do not submit your work until you have completed the measurable objectives. So you're going to do that. That's the next step after you finish your standards and your transfer goals. If you have any questions, you know you can reach me by email usually. I'm always willing to answer any questions and clarify anything that you need clarified. So with that, go watch the Designing Measurable Objectives and you can complete the section 1 of your lesson plan. And let me know if you have any questions.